Well, good afternoon. This is Andrea Ormsby, and I help moms get clear on what their next steps should be so that they can mother from a place of strength and courage instead of from a place of fear. So I wanted to talk to you, Mom, because I want to ask you, how well do you actually receive? You're always giving, and you know it. You're exhausting yourself going in and out of different school activities or the extracurricular activities with your children. And if you're like me, I've got 3 little boys, and there's a lot. I have a limit of only so many activities this mom can run around from one to the other. And with my 9-year-old and my twin 7-year-olds, even just one activity for each of them makes life busy. But with that said, I wasn't always ready and willing to receive help when I needed it. And I ask you, Mom, how well do you receive that help? When that help is offered to you, maybe some of you are thinking, I don't really have much help, Andrea. I wish I had help. But I do want to ask you to really think about, even if help was offered to you, how willing would you be to receive that help? And specifically, I think back to when my twins were first born, and we didn't have very many friends when we gave birth to my twins because we had moved to a new area, we had just joined a new church, and with that said, we found out we were expecting twins literally within the first 2 months of starting our church. And we traveled to and from work, my husband and I, and we mostly drove. At times I did take the train in. Regardless, it was at least an hour transportation when my twins were born, and we also had a little one. So we didn't have very much time to invest, at least not in the beginning, in our church and getting to know people. We certainly wanted to, of course, want to get to know people, get to know the area that we live, but because of where we live, a lot of people traveled, and because of that, we didn't really get to know very much of our neighbors. We saw them, we knew them in terms of by face, but we didn't get to connect with them. And because of that, it was a very lonely time. And then you find out you're having twins. If you're a twin mom, you know that shock. You know, it's like, okay, now what? And that's an easy statement. So I don't know what your experience was when you found out you're having twins. Maybe you just found out you're having twins. And just that initial shock, you're still trying to get over. But with us, even once we got over that initial shock, we didn't have very many friends to really reach out to or connect with. Or in my case, I really wanted another twin mom just to talk with. I had so many questions about this twin business, and no one around me had had twins. People that I did know who had had twins had older twins and really just couldn't relate to where I was. And maybe that's where you are. Maybe you know some people, maybe they've looked at you and said, yeah, good luck. And you get that look and you're wondering, what did I miss? Or you start to get nervous or fearful about whether you can really do this. And so I really want to speak to you because even when help was offered to us, I wasn't always ready to receive it. And so when it came time to our twins being born, we didn't have very much help outside of our immediate family. They did come and stay with us. I was very blessed to have my mom, who lives out of the country, to come and stay with us. I also had my mother-in-law, stay with us. I love my in-laws. I have a great relationship with them. What am I talking about? I am talking about moms learning how to receive, and specifically because we always need that help and we're not always willing to receive that help. And so I did receive the initial help because I really was stationed in my bed with twins. And so I couldn't really do very much, but then eventually as my twins got older and as the weeks and the months got by, I still had difficulty asking for help. And I ask you, Mom, is that you? Are you that mom who feels like you have to do everything? I felt like that. I felt like I've got to prove myself that I can handle these twins, and I've got to be able to do this, be that wife for my spouse as well. And I have to be this person, just involved in so many things. But I soon realized that that was just not realistic, and I was not going to be able to do that. And so often, us moms, and maybe this is you, we have help even available to us. People might have asked me if I wanted help, did we need anything? But honestly, I really did not know what to say. Even after my firstborn was born, I have a 9-year-old right now, and when he was born, I did go back to work. And even then, I didn't ask for very much help because, again, I was coming from the perspective of I have to be this super mom, and that's part of my badge of proving that I can handle being this mom of this child, or in my case, eventually 3 children. But it did not help me, and it did not prove anything. At the grand scheme of life, I realize now looking back, and this is probably what you're seeing, Mom, that all that does is really exhaust you, and it really does not help you. We think that we have to do this as part of proving that we're a good mom. We have to be there for our children and provide, that perfect lunch that everybody individually wants. If you got kids like mine, everybody does not enjoy the same thing. So it has to be individually packed and done a certain way just because that's how they are. My oldest, yes, is a picky child, and he knows what he likes, and he very much knows what he doesn't like. And so I definitely did put that stress on myself for a long time about, I got to get this right, and I've got to do it right every single time. And the same thing with my other children. Even with my husband, I really wanted to focus so much on serving him and serving him in the best way, in the right way, and I didn't leave very much room, certainly not for error. I wasn't allowed to make a mistake, because how can I make a mistake? These children are going to die if I make a mistake. My husband is going to leave me if I make a mistake. And maybe these are some of the strange questions. It sounds strange when you say it, but really at the grand scheme of it, when you dig down to the root, you really are questioning some of these ideas. And you really are wondering, well, how are these children really going to survive if I don't do this? And, what are people going to think if I don't show up in this way? All these other moms are talking about this, and I haven't done that yet. And I need to step up my game and catch up with them. And I really want to tell you, Mom, that's so not true. It's just not reality. You running over and over again and just expending all this energy is going to lead to one thing only, and that is your exhaustion. And once you become so exhausted that you can't even sleep right, you can't even function, you really are just so irritable, you're short-fused, you don't have the patience you used to. Maybe you didn't think you had patience. Well, you have even less now. Even your relationship with your spouse is just, maybe you're passing ships, or maybe when you do speak, it's such a heightened conversation that it doesn't even warrant beginning, because it's just going to turn into an argument. And I know what that feels like, because I remember. And I definitely remember that being in that place of always feeling like I had to control things. And that put so much pressure on me and on my shoulders that just wasn't realistic and wasn't helpful or fruitful for my house or my family, certainly not for me. Because what ended up happening is once I was empty, I kept still trying to pour out into all these different lives, but I couldn't do it effectively when there was nothing left to pour out. And so I just put more burden on myself, because I had these unrealistic expectations that I had put on myself that I simply could not reach, because they were unrealistic, especially with being so empty. But I still expected myself. I still pushed myself. I still went that far until things started to deplete and I started to break down. And so with that breakdown, my relationship with my husband suffered. My relationship with my children suffered. And relationships with other people suffered. And even my relationship with God suffered. Because what I ended up doing is, instead of drawing closer to God, and maybe you're in that place, and maybe that does draw you close to God, or suffering is supposed to draw us closer to God. But in my case, it drew me further away from Him. And in thinking back, I know that was really rooted in me really not wanting to face the truth. The truth being, I really don't have that control. I really don't have that ability to make everything happen the way I want it to. I really don't have that ability to control what that future is going to look like. I just didn't have that control. But I didn't want to acknowledge and accept that. I kept fighting against that. The control really belongs to God. And if I had been in a place that I could sit back and just allow God to do what I really can't do, what I'm not meant to do, then it would have been a very different experience for me. But because I focused more on trying to do so much and be everything to everybody, I wiped out. And I didn't have that strength. And maybe this is what you can relate to. If you are wiping out, or if you've been wiped out, maybe you've been depressed because you're just doing mommy all the time and it's not even exciting you anymore. You feel like you want to run away. I know that feeling. And you feel bad. You don't want to tell anybody. How could you tell somebody you want to run away? from your family who you really do love, from your spouse that you really do love. And maybe, you kind of question the idea and you might not think you right do it, but then at the same time, you're doing your day in and day out just frustrated and just lacking so much joy. And you're wondering, what's the point? What is the point? And then you start that negative talk. I know that talk. You start telling yourself you're a bad mom, you're the worst wife, you can't do anything right. What's the point? You're trying so hard anyway, nothing's going right, so what's the difference? I know. And that's exactly what the devil tries to say. In those times where we are weak, the devil's quick to be right up in our ear and telling us all these different things that really is so far from the truth, but we are in that weak space. And maybe if you were like me, you didn't have that circle of support around you to really help you see the truth in the midst of it. And so even though I had loving family around me, and they weren't physically around me all the time, but at least I had access, I didn't want to reach out. I didn't want to tell them that truth. Why would I want to admit that? Because then that would admit I suck as a mom. And that was like my worst fear. And maybe that is your worst fear. And I really want to encourage you, Mom, that if this is you, that you don't have to feel this way. You don't have to suffer in that silence. I know you can't tell anybody because you feel like they're going to judge you, or maybe they're going to judge your children because of what's going on, and you just know you don't want them to see your children that way, or you don't want people to think about your marriage relationship in that way. You don't want them to know the truth. But you need to talk. You need to get it out. You need to expose the devil for his lies now before it's too late. Because what that does is it eats away at your character, it eats away at your beliefs, and all those good and true beliefs and how God has intentionally created you and how he has made you perfect. All of those truths, you know. I know you learned it. I know you read the same book I do. And those are all promises and truths that are in there. But because you know it up here, but you're not seeing in practice, you're questioning them. And really, I want to encourage you, Mom, if this is you, that you really should read Psalm 77. I know that chapter really spoke to me when I was going through that hard time. And I really didn't know. I didn't picture it. I actually ended up going to an event, and that is one of the chapters that the speaker spoke about. Excuse me. And so in reading that chapter, we were actually required to dissect what we were reading. And in dissecting it, it was so powerful for me that I ended up just dissecting it and dissecting it and dissecting it. And it just still came alive to me. And specifically, I want to note verse 11 of Psalm 77, which specifically points out that there is a shift. From verses 1 through 10, there is a mindset that was so me. Yet, verse 11 pops in, and there's a shift in that mindset. And once you make that shift, which is what you need to do, Mom, to get out of this stuck cycle, to get off of that hamster wheel that you keep running in and just feeling like, what is the point? To get out of that, you need to make a shift that starts here. And that shift is going to turn your attention to what you know to be true. The truths that you know to be true. But specifically, not just knowing it, but applying it. And I know you feel weak. I know you don't know how. Well, Andrea, okay, I want to do that. I don't want to sit here. I get that. But you have to consciously and intentionally start telling yourself those truths. Speak it out verbally, yes, into the atmosphere, to yourself in the mirror, looking directly to yourself and telling yourself those truths. That's exactly what I did. And these are truths that I grew up with. These are truths that I sang the songs on. These weren't brand new to me, but what I had done over the years and I hadn't realized, and this is what you may have been doing, Mom, is you have been forgetting to apply those truths to yourself. Maybe you've been applying them to your children, even to your spouse and to the people around you. But when you don't ingest and consciously, intentionally make that an effort for yourself, it's easy to forget. And then you wrap that up in you always trying to control the situation and what's happening. And you don't want that feeling of not being in control, because then that proves you're not very good of the mom. And so because of that, you just fight and you focus on that instead of focusing up above and really relying on that strength that God gives you, and to help asking you for him to ask you, speak to you about where you need to go and tell you what you should be doing and what you shouldn't be doing, what you shouldn't be focusing on. So you don't have to figure it all out by yourself. I know, I did it. I know. And I know that's what has been going on. But you don't have to do all of that. You can choose to make that shift. And once you make that shift, and as you see in the rest of those verses of that book, you'll see in that chapter, you will see the difference. It's like you could see the courage building in the writer, and you could see the strength growing in that writer. Because once you acknowledge the power that God has, and you acknowledge that power lives inside of you, and you acknowledge that God intentionally gave you that power, not to just sit there and waste and fearfully wonder what's going to happen next and why did God make you? No. That is what the devil wants you to think and where he wants you to be. But when you start focusing on where God wants you to focus on so that you can do what God has you to do, you end up operating differently. But you have to start with yourself, and you have to start with that change, and you have to intentionally work on you, especially if this has been going on a while with you, Mom. It's going to take work, because you're going to have to unlearn a lot of what you've been practicing and what's become routine for you and how you've been talking to yourself. If you even write some of the things that you've been saying to yourself and see it on paper, you might even be surprised. I know I was surprised when I did it and wrote down some of the things I say to myself often. Even record yourself. I know you might be strange, you might feel strange hearing your voice, or walking around with the recorder. Many of these phones, depending on your phone that you're even watching me, I'm sure you have some type of audio that you can just play for a certain period of time. Why don't you record yourself during that period of time where you feel like you most feel stressed? Yeah, I know. I had those times of the day too. And why don't you play that audio for yourself and listen to the theme? Because there's going to be a theme that shows up, and you're going to be able to see, wow, I didn't even realize. Because that's what happened to me. I didn't even realize, because I wasn't thinking that that was really happening. I was just focusing so much on doing and that I wasn't reaching these unrealistic expectations and then getting down on myself. And I know you can relate if this is what you've been doing, but I want to tell you to stop, and I want to tell you that you don't have to do that. And I want to tell you that you also don't have to suffer in that silence anymore. No, the people around you, you might not feel comfortable talking with them, but God is not intending for you to go through this life this way. And I can help you. So I really hope and pray that if this is you and if this really resonates with you, then you would click on my link in my bio, bit.ly/Courage Coach Form, bit.ly/Courage Coach Form, bit.ly/Courage Coach Form. If you click on that form, you'll be able to answer some questions that would allow you to apply for a strategy session with me. If any of what I've shared with you today has been resonating with you, then I encourage you to take that next step and apply for a strategy session today. Because you don't have to run that hamster wheel if you're tired of it. You don't have to keep going in that stuck cycle that you are just so done with. You're depressed all the time. There's so much more to this life with you. You're an awesome mom. That's how God created you. And you don't have to suffer anymore. But you have to choose differently for yourself. And I want to encourage you that if this resonates with you, then choose differently by applying for a strategy session. If you know of another mom, because we all know other moms and we all care about those moms, but if you see them suffering, if you see them silenced, if you know, even God might have spoken to your heart to say, this person is really struggling and you just haven't known how to reach out to them, I encourage you to share this scope with them. It might open the door for communication. It might allow them to apply for a strategy session, or it might help them to see, even for themselves, that this is not right. And they don't have to just settle with life being status quo, and this is what I have to accept. And maybe this is you. Maybe you feel like you've been in a circle of women, of moms who all complain about the same thing that you're going through. And so you all have accepted that this is how life has to be. But there's something nagging at you that, no, I don't believe this is how life has to be. And I'm telling you, it doesn't. But you still have to choose differently for yourself. And I can help you do that if you apply for a strategy session. So again, I really hope and pray that this helps you and that this is clear for you. And if this really speaks to you, I encourage you again to reach out to your mom. Share these scopes. Share my link with whatever mom that you know needs to hear this information, because too often we are just running, and we do not stop and think for ourselves, what do I need? And there's so many moms that I work with that just over and over again I speak with day in and day out, and they don't even realize that they need that help. And so care for another mom by showing them you love them, you're trying to help them. And at the same time, if you are that mom who has just been resisting that help, but you realize now something's got to give, then I encourage you to reach out to me, because I would love to help you get clear on that next step. You're intended to mother strong. That's how God created you. He doesn't want you to hide out in this fearful place. He wants you to mother strong and be that example for your babies. Even if it's one little baby, if you've got 2 babies in your belly, like how I did, and yes, you're going to be at twin mom and you're just sitting in that fear, then I encourage you, please, to do something for yourself so that you can do more for those that you love around you. So I do hope and pray this blesses you and speaks to you, and that you do something about it today. And in the meantime, follow me so that you can get notifications on when I am on live again, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care.